Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. Today we're going to talk about the Philadelphia platform, and we're going to be having a call-in from Webster Tarpley to hear about the truly historic event that happened on the last 4th of July in Philadelphia, now that the peace movement, the anti-war movement, and the 9/11 Truth movement, along with some other organizations, are uniting. And what we're talking about today you can find on the website of actindependent.org. So I'm having a reasonably good hair day today, and I think I will thus give a credit to Mark Rogers, who is doing a trade for my hair while we're waiting for Webster Tarpley to call in. The Philadelphia platform is something extraordinarily important, and we're going to find out why very soon from Webster when he calls us. But I'm going to have to roll the tapes because I have to be out of the Express studio at 2 o'clock. So let's see if I can start to brush you up on some of what the Philadelphia platform is about, and then we will, gee, I wish we could have call-ins. The Philadelphia Emergency Anti-War Convention is what took place last 4th of July. You can see a bunch of delegates there, and I was one of them. I don't think I'm in this shot, but believe me, I was there, and it went on for hours, and it was fascinating. There are 5 policy goals that came as a result of this convention. One is to impeach, remove, and indict Bush, Cheney, and their henchmen. The second point is end all wars. All U.S. troops must be brought home at once from Afghanistan and Iraq by any means necessary, including the immediate cutoff of funding. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's how we ended the Vietnam War. Let me take this off so you can see it better. No Bush police state dictatorship, repeal the Patriot Act, restore full habeas corpus, respect the Bill of Rights and the Geneva Convention. I think it was pointed out by a conservative fellow on the radio that the president now has more rights than King George did, and I hope I remember to ask Webster about that when he calls in. The fourth point is government by the people, not by cliques of bankers and financiers. The fifth point is 9/11 truth, period. Publish the full 9/11 documentation and reopen the investigation. So there you have it, the Philadelphia platform. I'm going to be speaking tonight at St. Mark's, and St. Mark's is the church that has had, I believe, meetings every single Sunday since 9/11, with very few exceptions. And this is something to be very proud of as New Yorkers, to have a location where the flame is kept, the spirit of the importance of this tragedy is kept alive, not for the sake of wallowing in the tragedy, no, not by any means, but for the sake of staying close to that which may be, which certainly is painful, staying close in such a way that we're not shocked and we're not hypnotized by it, we're not put in a trance by it, but that we can maintain our alignment, our backbone, you know, stand erect in the onslaught of all of this horror and see our way clear to a better future. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves up for even more disaster. So I guess I'll just have to pretend that Webster's calling in, and I will go through this PowerPoint presentation that he wanted me to. Oops, there we are. Webster, is that you?
Hello.
Great. Webster, I'm so late that I'm going to have to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm so late I had to start the tapes rolling, so I have your PowerPoint. Can we go into it right now?
Yes, but where are you? I mean, what are you telling me?
All I did was I took him to the website of Act Independent, and I read out the 5 different points of the platform.
So what are we going to do? We're going to go through all these slides in half hour?
Yes, and hopefully we can do 2 shows because I can see you have so much here.
Yeah, it's about, I mean, I managed to do it in about 20 minutes in the actual, event, but that's really short shrift, right? That's talking as fast as you can.
Okay, well,
I'm getting a big echo, which is very problematic.
Okay, even when you talk, it's echoing?
Yeah, that's when it echoes.
I don't know what to do about that. You want to call up again? I'll stop the tapes?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay, hang on.
Here we go again.
Yes, here we are. Okay.
Fire away.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, Webster's, we've got Webster Tarpley on the line, and what we have up is a PowerPoint presentation, the Philadelphia Emergency Anti-War Convention. So Webster, it was really exciting, and thank you for joining us on Farther Down the Rabbit Hole.
Thank you, Paula. What we did, of course, you were there, on July 4th in Philadelphia, in the shadow of Independence Hall, with the great events of 1776 and 1787, the Declaration of Independence and the Federal Constitution, a couple of hundred yards away. We attempted to create a new political alternative in the present context of the breakdown of the parties, as in particular the massive betrayal by the Democratic Party of the peace movement, anti-war movement, and impeachment movement. They had promised, when they were asking for your votes, they broadly hinted they were going to impeach Bush and put an end to the Iraq War, and now impeachment is suddenly off the table, and the Democrats at the end of May have voted for the expanded war. They gave their votes for an escalated war. So that's the rationale of the Philadelphia Emergency Anti-War Convention. Now we got to push ahead with our slides. Here we go to the next one. People are invited to do their summer planning around events in Washington, D.C., and indeed in New York City at the crime scene, World Trade Center. That would be one side, and the other side, Lafayette Park in front of the White House. And you can go to dc911truth.org that you see there. Now, the next one, Cindy Sheehan. We responded to a call from Cindy Sheehan. She had felt obviously very betrayed by the cynical parliamentary cretins of the Democratic Party, the Pelosi's, the Reeds, and so forth, all of them bought and paid for by big money donors who decided that they were going to keep the war going and that they weren't going to fight Bush and his minions. So she turned around and said, let's have a meeting in Philadelphia on July 4th and see where the peace movement should go. And I think we've succeeded in that with the Philadelphia Convention. And we brought together, as maybe you've already mentioned, the peace movement, the impeachment movement, anti-globalization, civil rights, civil liberties, fair vote count, anti-tax, labor, veterans, and really everybody who's got any positive things to say about anything in the United States. There's a lot of noise in the line, so maybe you want to take a look at that.
No, I just took care of it. I was trying to get you higher.
Okay, fine. So I think we've done that. So that's Cindy Sheehan. She also said that she does not believe in the official version, that she's grateful for the 9/11 people that have supported her, that she's not an expert, but she believes the collapse of the two towers is controlled demolition, and she believes the Jersey girls are right and all the documents that are being kept secret about 9/11 should be published. Now, going on, I wanted to show with my cover here of my Bush biography, this is the 1992 Bush biography, actually published 15 years ago this month in the middle of the 1992 campaign, designed to make people think twice about George Bush for a second term, and we may be seeing the second term right now today. In effect, my website, tarpley.net, is the oldest continuous anti-Bush website in the world. The paper edition you see here, published in 1992. The whole book has been available for free online since October 1996, and I don't think there's an older anti-Bush website going. Pushing ahead, the problem we have is Cheney, understood as the Cheney faction. Cheney, of course, is a puppet of other interests. We can identify them with names like George Shultz, Rupert Murdoch, many Wall Street groups that essentially are Cheney's backers and indeed Cheney's controllers. Every 4 to 6 months, Cheney pulls himself together and tries to launch a new attempt to get the war with Iran, which is the main ambition that he seems to have left in his wretched life. And he tried that at the end of March, beginning of April, came quite close. But now the sky is dense with omens that he's trying this again. We have the British press saying that there's been a faction fight in the Bush administration, that Cheney has won, that Bush is now committed to the attack on Iran. We've got an extra carrier going to the Gulf. We've got a Victor Lieberman of the Israeli government going to Europe and talking very loudly about how there's going to be an attack on Iran. Many columnists, Paul Craig Roberts, Pat Buchanan, many others, Cindy Sheehan herself, Ron Paul, Republican presidential candidate, all of them talking about this grave danger. So that's the enemy we've got to defeat. Now in the next slide, The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington. That is the general program. The Neocon view of your future is that you will spend your life fighting and dying and suffering and sacrificing for an endless war against the Arab and Islamic world first, because of their population growth, against China because of their economic growth, and against Russia because of their military power. It is simply a recipe for World War III. It is a ruling class that is collectively insane and affected, obviously, by a war psychosis. So if you don't want this, you've got to mobilize now. If we go to the next one, we can see that the Union of Concerned Scientists, the atomic scientists, have essentially put the world clock at about 5 minutes to midnight. And I think the main thing there is the renewed danger of thermonuclear war. Going to the next one. The day after. Now, people who had lived during the Cold War might have thought that they had left this all behind with the end of the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. But it is now back, and it is back really for only one reason. Neocon fascist madmen running the United States, the Wolfowitzes, the Pearls, the Woolseys, the Ledines, the Cheneys, obviously, the Rumsfelds, and ultimately Bush. And they have now concocted a world situation where an all-out thermonuclear exchange is certainly visible on the horizon, maybe not immediately at the door, but you can see how it might get to that. Pushing ahead, the London Economist this spring put the Cheney program on its cover, and that is Next Stop Iran. That's a B-2 stealth bomber of the kind that would be used in a nuclear sneak attack on Iran, and that is what the Cheney group is notoriously talking about. William Crystal, many others have been ranting about the need to stop Iran, and there are all kinds of voices from the neocon camp being raised in this regard. You might say, well, how can you start another war when you're already defeated in Iraq? They would regard this as a kind of hysterical flight forward from the conventional war in Iraq, which they've lost, to the nuclear attack on Iran, which they delude themselves they could win. As we push ahead, you can see that this Middle East map, look at Iran in particular. Look how big Iran is, right? It's 4 times the size of Iraq in terms of area, and it's 3 times the population. And if the U.S. is already defeated in Iraq, and the Israelis are defeated in Lebanon, and NATO in general is defeated in Afghanistan, which you can also see there along the right-hand edge of the map, how in God's name could they start attacking Iran? But that is the goal. So it is a suicidal flight forward. If we push ahead, the significance of Iran is that Persian Gulf area, Arabian Gulf from the Arab point of view, and the Straits of Hormuz that you see right there towards the right-hand side of the map. Now that is the aorta of the world in 2 respects. First of all, about 1/3 of the world's oil comes through the Straits of Hormuz. It's about the size of Long Island Sound at most, and that's where it all has to go through. On the other hand, all the supplies for the U.S. forces in Iraq have to go by ship through that same waterway. So if you declare war on Iran by bombing them, look at that long coastline. It's 1,000 miles, I guess, of coastline, and all they need is mines, torpedoes, tanks, artillery pieces, burning oil slicks, all kinds of variations. They've got all kinds of missiles, as we're going to see. It's very likely that the Straits of Hormuz will be closed. You can even just sink ships there. Hulks will do the job. You can't get any super tankers out. The world oil supply goes down to nothing. Gasoline goes to $100 a gallon. There's a panic flight out of the U.S. dollar, and that would essentially be the end of the world as we've known it. And just to back that up, as we go to the next one, you see the Yakuts missile. That is a very capable Russian missile designed to sink a U.S. carrier or a supertanker. And the Iranians must be assumed to have these things, so they'll be shooting those from their long coastline at all of those tankers. Was there something?
Webster, I just want to make something super crystal clear. You're
Right.
saying that the army will be routed.
Yes,
And
we're
just
going to get to that. Hang on, Paula. We got to go in order. Look, encirclement and decimation of the U.S. forces in Iraq. They couldn't be clearer than that. If you just hang on, we'll get to all of this.
okay.
The situation of the U.S. forces in Iraq. Let's take a look at that. As we go on to this map, it's the ethnic map that people know. The blue in the north are the Kurds. They're pro-U.S.
Just a second, Webster. I don't know if I'm on the same map. I've got a picture of this of the blue Persian Arabian Gulf, the water.
We'll go ahead and come forward to encirclement and decimation. Move forward.
Okay.
Okay, encirclement and decimation?
Yes.
Okay, then beyond that is a map, right?
Okay.
Okay, so we got the blue in the north is the Kurdish area,
Okay, got it.
and that's pro-U.S., I suppose, but they've got their own quarrel with Turkey, so forget them. The green is the Sunnis, who are very energetic opponents of foreign occupation, and then the Shiites, who have chosen up to now to ally for their own purposes with the U.S. and the British, but they're also more allied with Iran. So you've got this tripartite ethnic division, and if we take the next one, this is the picture, I think, that says it all. You see the red line there? That's the U.S. supply line. It goes from the port of Kuwait up two roads that are about 400 miles long each, so 800 miles of roads to defend. These are tanker trucks driven by Filipinos, Turks, Bangladeshis, desperate men from around the world who are trying to get money for their families, but they're not soldiers, they're not armed, they're not capable of fighting. They're escorted by contractors, meaning mercenaries, who are going to run away as soon as the cost-benefit analysis doesn't look so good for them. And of course, this is the area of the Mahdi army. So if you've got the U.S. courting a war against all Shiites, be they Iranian or Hezbollah or Muqtada Sadr and the Mahdi army, you see those green arrows coming in along the red supply line. Those are simply RPGs, small patrols, small unit actions that could begin to shoot up these tanker trucks and freight trucks that the U.S. has to use to bring in water, fuel, ammunition, medical supplies, everything, because it all comes in by truck convoy. If we go beyond just the Mahdi army, if you get an actual attack on Iran, then you get those big black arrows coming in. In other words, that's the Iranian Pastaran, and they will, if the Mahdi army can't do it by themselves, which I think they can, then the jugular vein there, the aorta, will be cut, and you'll have 160,000 U.S. forces sitting around Baghdad with no gasoline, no water, no food, and so forth. So that's a very grim recipe. That's Dunkirk if you're lucky, if you get out, and Stalingrad if you don't get out. So it means essentially the wiping out of these U.S. forces as a military group.
So Webster, this is the map that's never shown by the media.
Yeah, it's a map showing what could happen, and of course it hasn't happened yet. It could have happened. We know that the attacks on the convoys have gone up 300% in 06-07 compared to what they were in 05-06. That's a recent story. They've gone up from about 300 to almost 900. So it is increasing. That triangle of death is the area a bit south of Baghdad that would be part of this. So that's all very, very dangerous. And the longer you leave them there, the more likely this becomes. That's the folly of the Democratic Party position. They say, we support the troops, we're going to support keeping them there. Well, if you keep them there, they may be wiped out. How are you going to support them if they get wiped out? And of course, notice that a military catastrophe of this dimension would be Cheney's ticket to impose martial law here at home and begin nuking Iran, because he would argue, oh, this must be the Iranians, even if it's only Muqtada Sadr. Let's go to the next picture. There's Muqtada Sadr, right, if we're on the same page. He's the head of the Mahdi army. That's the main Shiite leader. He's a populist. He's actually an Iraqi nationalist in many ways. He wants the U.S. out. And, of course, he's ready for all kinds of dirty deals. But ultimately, if you put him with his back to the wall and his 100,000 trained fighters, he has the capability of cutting that supply line, and that's what you have to look at. So why don't we end this lunatic adventure now before more and more people get hurt? Let's go to the next one. There's an invulnerable, invincible, impregnable Israeli tank. That's the Merkava tank, the most modern the Israelis have. And it's symbolic of the fact that when the Israelis attacked Lebanon last summer, they lost one full armored division. Not every tank necessarily, but one armored division was no longer usable. as a fighting force. And it shows that the model of warfare that the U.S., the British, and the Israelis have been using will not work in today's Middle East. If Hezbollah-type methods are used, or if the Iranians use those, that will be a figure of what's waiting for the U.S. as well. Now, the Democratic Party, as we go to the next map, the Democratic Party says we're going to take the troops out of Iraq and send them to Afghanistan. That's even worse. That is even more certainly a ticket to doom, because if you look at Afghanistan, it's all the way landlocked in there. There's only one way to get in on land, really, which is the Khyber Pass between Islamabad and Kabul, as you see towards the upper right center of the map, and that can be cut. And that means everybody inside essentially will have to be airlifted out, and their equipment will remain there. The notion of Afghanistan as a viable war front is just insane. The British had whole armies annihilated there. The Russians can tell you all about how hopeless it is to try to occupy Afghanistan. But the Democratic Party still says this is the just war that ought to be fought. And of course, that's all based on the 9/11 myth, which is precisely a myth. Now, the leadership of the Democratic Party, as we go to the next slide, the leadership of the Democratic Party knows exactly what Cheney is preparing, because they have been publicly told by one of their own leaders in the hearings in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This is February 1st, 2007. Let's go to Zbigniew Brzezinski. There's his face, right? That's the guy who was the head of the National Security Council under Carter, and he was the one who lured the Soviets into Afghanistan knowing that they would be destroyed there. His main passion is that he hates Russia. He's not really a neocon. The neocons are obsessed with Israel and the Middle East. He has scorn for that. He says, look, if you can knock off Moscow and Beijing, then you rule the world, and the Middle East will simply fall into line. What I think he argues is the Middle East is essentially a sideshow, and the Middle East indeed is a sideshow, chiefly valuable because of the oil that goes to Japan and Europe, which are the main prizes in this world. But let's look at what Brzezinski says. Let's go to the next text slide. A plausible scenario for a military collision with Iran, he told the Senate in February, involves Iraqi failure to meet the benchmarks, we've had that, followed by accusations of Iranian responsibility for the failure, right? And then by some provocation in Iraq, or a terrorist act in the United States blamed on Iran. And that will lead to the U.S., a defensive action with the United States lonely, without allies, in a quagmire, and this quagmire will include Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, which is even bigger in population than Iran. That's February. Now look, let's go back. A plausible, next slide, a plausible military scenario for a military collision with Iran involves a terrorist act in the U.S. blamed on Iran. Now what he's saying there is that he's aware that the Cheney faction is scheming for a new 9/11, a new Gulf of Tonkin, and that will be used as the ticket into this wider war with Iran. It's very important to see that the leaders of the Democratic Party heard this testimony, and they have done nothing. They have not raised a hue and cry. They haven't held hearings. They haven't tried to identify the networks that's doing this, bust it up. They're limited to this, useful but very limited, inadequate ultimately, stuff about how, we've got to scale down the Iraq war, do it gradually, support the troops, and so forth. And all the while, Cheney is preparing illegal provocations, treason, insurrection, and the Democratic Party does nothing. So there's my next slide. The 9/11 Truth Movement and its allies in the Philadelphia platform must mobilize on this Brzezinski warning, because the Democrats have done absolutely nothing to stop this, and it's gotten worse over the years. Now, moving on, the Foreign Affairs article here shows that this is really only the beginning. The Rise of U.S. Nuclear Primacy by Lieber and Press, two neocon professors, published by the Council on Foreign Relations, Foreign Affairs last spring, March, April 06. It will probably soon be possible for the United States to destroy the long-range nuclear arsenals of Russia or China with a first strike. And that means a nuclear or thermonuclear sneak attack. And the first thing I would tell you about this is it's baloney. It won't work. The Russians will have some missile somewhere, and we can be sure that New York will be at the top of the list. So goodbye, New York, if Lieber and Press, neocon fascist madmen, get their way. This is now the issue with Putin. He says he doesn't want radars in in the in ABM missiles, anti-ballistic missile defense forces, whatever they're called, in Poland and the Czech Republic. He's concerned that the U.S. is preparing a first strike against Russia and that those installations would be a part of it. So the essence of it, as we go to the next slide, is the lunacy of Dr. Strangelove, right? The madman thermonuclear war theoretician and strategist, the typical Rand Corporation, Herman Kahn, world targets and megadeaths and all this other stuff. But these guys never went away, and now they're back en masse, and this is the neocons. Now, as we go to the next one, we've got our man Slim Pickens going down on that H-bomb towards the Soviet missile site. The big question for the U.S. military is, generals and colonels all, are you willing to be dragged into these meat grinders by the neocon fascist madmen? We know that the military has contempt for people like Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz and so forth, because these are people who have never had military service, and they speak about, brushing aside the resistance of the Iraqis and all the rest of this stuff. But when it comes to the bleeding, the neocons are never there. So the Army and the Marine Corps especially, gentlemen and ladies, are you willing to ride the neocon H-bomb down into World War III? Now, to make it more explicit, Putin's war warning on the next slide. Munich. This was back in February also. Here's Putin on the next slide arriving, right, at the Munich, it's a World Strategic Affairs Conference, the main one in the world. I knew the guy who founded it. He's Ewald von Kleist. The guy who founded it was part of the plot to kill Hitler back in 1944. Very interesting person.
Wow.
Anyway, as we go to Putin's speech, next slide, one single center of power, one single center of force, one single center of decision-making. This is the world of one master, one sovereign. Well, it's the U.S. unilateral view of the world under the neocons, and what Putin is signaling is that Russia simply will not accept it. The U.S., with its aggression, is nourishing an arms race with the desire of countries to get nuclear weapons. In other words, let's assume, for the sake of argument, what is not proven, that Iran wants to build nuclear weapons. Why would they want that? Because they're threatened with being destroyed and reduced to abject misery and destruction in the same way that Iraq was. If the U.S. is going to come after them, they'll be next. And like anybody with any guts or gumption, they say, no, we're not going to do it, and we'll use whatever means are necessary. The Washington Post, as we see on the next slide, clear.
Webster, we have to change tapes, okay?
Okay, I'll stop.
Okay, hang on, just 1 second. This is Paula Gloria. Stay tuned for part 2. You can also see it on rabbitholecentral.tv, and we hope in the future to be able to take call-ins over the